Hello, everybody. This is Jess from 3D Learning Experts, and you're listening to the LD Experts Podcast, the show for busy parents who want to help their kids with learning disabilities, or as I like to say, learning differences, go from surviving to thriving. Hello. Today, we're very honored to have Dr. Sarah Cheyette with us today to talk to us about ADHD. She is a pediatric neurologist who has written several books on the topic, and she has done blogs as well with Psychology Today. And Dr. Sarah helps both children and parents who are experiencing challenges with ADHD learn how to cope. Thank you so much, Sarah, for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here, Jess. I'm honored.
Awesome. So, let's just start from the beginning. How did you get into helping both children and their parents with ADHD?
Well, Jess, that's almost a funny story. I would say, maybe not funny, but it's an unusual story, I will say. Here's the thing: is that I'm a pediatric neurologist, and we deal with brain issues. One of the brain issues we deal with is migraines and headaches. And I had patients who had really bad migraines, and when I'm trying to figure out why they're having migraines, I'm finding out that they're under a lot of stress. And why are they under a lot of stress? Well, they can't concentrate. Nobody had diagnosed them with ADHD. So, I started doing that, and it kind of grew from there. And, it's something where we see ADHD affect a lot of life, including sleep, including emotions like depression or worry. Um, and so, because it's so important, it's my great pleasure to help people who are dealing with issues with managing their attention.
And so, how did it evolve from helping your pediatric clients to helping their parents as well?
Jess, if there's a more hereditary disease or disorder, or whatever you want to call it, feature maybe, if there's a more hereditary feature, I'm going to tell you, it's hard to find. Many children with ADHD have parents with ADHD, and that's the long and short of it. We do believe that this is by and large genetic, although there can certainly be environmental factors that are part of that. But what I can tell you is that ADHD runs in family, and that's no joke. Sometimes it's hard to really know about extended family members. There may be cultural differences, or back in those days, people were not looking at diagnoses like they do these days.
Well, I feel like too in the past, um, we worked off our energy more than we do today, which I think that's a contributing factor to the accelerated amount of ADHD. Would you agree?
Oh, most definitely. I mean, Uh, I hope all your audience members have read like the Little House books, and that talked about, they gave a vivid picture of what kids were responsible for or not responsible for in the 1860s America.
So you're saying the
And
Little House on the Prairie series?
yeah, you
Okay,
remember
yes, that was
those?
my favorite TV show. I would run home
Oh,
after school to watch it.
absolutely. And the books are excellent and all that. There's some things about the books are outdated, and, views towards Native Americans and all that, but they do give a vivid picture of a different time in kids' lives. The kids were outside all the time practically. They didn't have very much of an inside to go to. And they worked outside, and they were responsible. They were given a lot of responsibility at a young age. I gotta say, that's pretty opposite to what we're doing with kids now. And
Absolutely.
I believe that makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
Not only that, of course, the elephant in the room, which is more like a enormous mammoth, which is the electronics, and what is that doing to us?
Yeah. So, since we live in a world of electronics, and I mean, kids are starting to use tablets as early as one
Two,
year old. I
one.
mean,
Yeah.
what suggestions do you have for families and parents these days?
So I tell families who come to me with the same thing I nag my own kids, which is that I don't see any reason why they should be on their tablets more than they should be reading or doing other activities that move at the pace of real life. As with everything, reading is a skill, and I don't have to tell you, it's something that needs to be practiced and worked on. And if you don't do it, you lose skills. And then you say, I don't like reading. And then it makes it harder to read. When you're doing your screens, many people lose interest in other things. It's like their brains are just seeing things that are just like new, 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 exciting, exciting, exciting. People, if they don't like what they're seeing, they just swipe it off and they look for something else. And real world doesn't work like that. I mean, people don't have scripts in front of them. The lighting sucks in the real world. And, you know, if you don't like something in the real world, you have to deal with it. But people are doing screens, and by that, I mean recreational screens, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, social media type of things, 8 hours a day sometimes. Sometimes I'm happy if they're only doing it 8 hours a day, but 8 hours is what they tell me, right?
Mm.
But if you do anything for 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day, I mean, I don't know where the magic number is, but it will train your brain to do that, right? If you were, um, I don't know, training in volleyball, and you did volleyball 3 hours a day, you would think about volleyball and how, eating and sleeping and all that affects volleyball. I mean, it would train your brain to think like a volleyball player. If you're doing screens for X hours during the day, it trains your brain to think in a screens way, which is in short little blips and only doing what you like.
Mm.
Then you take that brain and try to deal with the real world. It doesn't work very well.
That's wow. I don't even know what to say because I mean, our generation of children have not had nearly as much screen time as the generation coming up now. And I mean, it's that much going to be that much more challenging, I think, for parents to put their foot down and help their kids realize that that's not the best solution and get them back outside.
I'm worried, honestly, because um, I think it's important for kids to be able to find ways to amuse themselves and make life interesting. And that's same for adults, by the way. If you are constantly having things portrayed for you, you become very passive and you lose the ability to take something that might not be that interesting and develop an interest in it. You know, Lots of things are not interesting in the beginning, and then you get into them and you get like, wow, that's really cool. But I find that many kids will say, I don't like other things. I only like my screens. I'm bored unless I have my screen. Well, I believe it because you have no ability to fend for yourself. And, if you're reading or doing schoolwork, you're going to have a better deal if you can find a way to make it interesting for you. And to bring the discussion back to ADHD, although this is true of all of us, we all focus better when we're interested in something. So,
Absolutely.
finding a way to make it interesting for yourself is a skill. Great news is that if you can do that, you're guaranteed to have an interesting life, right? Because it's under your control.
Yeah. So, and I was thinking as you were sharing about the fact that school no longer has play activities for the kids, particularly the kindergartners. So they're not being creative in school anymore. Then they come home and they're on their screens and they're not being creative at home. So they're not practicing creativity.
Yeah.
And
I,
that's where is that going to leave our workforce in?
like I said, I'm worried. I mean, I don't know if I've had a bad week, but I'm a little worried. And what I would say is that it does you no good to tell your kid not to be on a screen and develop hobbies if you yourself don't do that too. So some of it might be finding ways that you can develop interest with your child, and buy a hunk of clay and make something. You could do a mosaic project. You could do all sorts of things, not to mention bike riding or other physical activities, frisbee, or, I mean, it does not have to be expensive. But I think that doing something like that with your child is worth its weight in gold and helps with attention span if that's what you're trying to do. People need to feel connected to their parents. And so having activities that you guys can do together is really an important part of this. And if there's anything that isolates you, it's a screen.
Yeah, if everyone's sitting at the dinner table on their phones, they're not learning how to communicate with their family members. So they're definitely not going to learn how to communicate outside of the household.
Right, right, exactly. And,
Yeah.
I think that, board games, I mean, what else could we do? People say, I don't know what else to do. Or my favorite was in lockdown. There was nothing else to do. There's always something else to do. So, I don't really want to nag you, Jess, but I'm telling you, it's a really important part of paying attention because if you've kind of ruined your ability to increase your own attention by making things interesting or doing things that are hard, you think you have ADHD. Or maybe, you're developing ADHD, although we don't really talk about ADHD that way at this point in time. You're supposed to sort of be made that way. But I think that, it will be a shame if people lose their ability to improve their own attention. I'm not saying it has to be great, but to do activities that move at the pace of the real world is a way to improve your attention span for the real world.
So, what kind of suggestions do you have for increasing their attention for doing homework or in the classroom setting?
So let's think about how we all operate, right? Everybody focuses sometimes, and everybody's not focused sometimes. Everyone focuses sometimes, everyone's not focused sometimes. When you're not focused so much of the time, like you've crossed the line, it's causing problems. That's basically what the definition of ADHD is. You're in the not focused state for so much of the time that it's causing problems. And there are other caveats to that, like that are important. You can't be, there should be no other clear alternative explanation. So if you're super depressed, if you're super sad, if you're super mad, if you're super tired, that could make your focus worse. Um, I guess what I'm saying is when we talk about treating ADHD or helping people with ADHD, we're really talking about how do you get from not focused way too much of the time to not focused a little bit less of the time, right? So to do that, we kind of have to understand what makes people focus and what makes people not focus. So one of the things that makes people focus is if they feel like they it's their idea to do that, right? When you have ownership of something, Jess, then you're much more likely to give it your all. So yeah, the kid might look at the homework and go, I hate this. Yeah, I know you hate this. It's pointless. Well, half of your homework is pointless, but what's in it for you? Why do we even care if people focus? Is when they focus, they're putting all their attention on one thing and they're more likely to get that thing done. And, since half the homework is pointless, um, it'll get done, it won't get done. That's not the important part. But the important part is how it makes you feel when you do things, right? Don't you feel great when you do something? And that feeling is so great that people in general love that feeling. They will go for that feeling. So trying to, make a child see what's in it for him is good. If you say, child, you need to do this. I mean, I have 4 kids. All 4 of them would say, that's the last thing I want to do right now. If I tell them to do it, they won't do it. If it's their idea, they're much more likely to do it. So, kind of trying to figure out what motivates them, what they can buy into is really important. Um, Trying to take it away from the, mother kid relationship is good and sort of say, well, it's between you and your teacher. Why don't you go have a talk with your teacher and let her know you think the homework is pointless? See what happens. Maybe she will agree with you. I don't know. But having them have it as their ownership is good. Also, a lot of people feel overwhelmed when they think things are hard, right? So trying to figure out ways to start it. You know, in writing, that blank page scares off a lot of professional writers, not to mention students. So how are you going to start? Well, you can talk, right? How about a voice to text? Can you spill some words onto the page? Can you open the Google Doc? Can you touch the computer keyboard? I mean, what is the one thing that you can do without like vomiting, right? So, that having people learn how to start things is a good idea. That often, once they get started, they're usually a lot happier.
Mhm.
Working in short bursts is helpful. And, a lot of kids, they do well when you talk about it in sports. So, talk to a kid, I don't want to do that. It's hard. Oh, yeah, okay, fine. I don't like hard things. Why should I do hard things? I don't know why I should do hard things. Well, how's your soccer going? They're like, oh my God, we played for the championship last week. Oh, was the other team good? They're like, oh my God, they were really tough to beat. We really worked so hard. How did that feel? Right. So, they've just kind of pointing it out that they can do hard things and doing hard things actually feels better than doing easy things. I mean, if they were a bunch of 10-year-olds who beat a bunch of 5-year-olds in soccer, that wouldn't be very meaningful, right? But
Right.
it's meaningful when they beat the best team and nobody expected them to, and they did it because they trained extra, they worked hard. You know, Many kids will relate to that.
Yeah. Those are great suggestions. Now, I was very hyper as a kid. Is that still considered part of ADHD?
Yes. So the way they're naming ADHD is very confusing to a lot of people. The whole thing is called ADHD. Now, some people with ADHD don't have the H. They're still called ADHD, but they're called ADHD inattentive type. And then there are the people who have ADHD with the H, which might have been you, or a combination there. But you're right, with language, it's really important because I have gone through like a whole hour with people, talking to them about their ADHD. Finally, at the end, they're like, I don't have ADHD, right? I'm not hyper. It's like, oh, I should mention, you know, but it's confusing for people. Many, like for a while, ADHD inattentive was called ADD. I wasn't part of the group that changed that, but I think
Who were
that's
they? We need to write a
I
letter.
know, right? Or let's get creative and do something else because I don't even like the name ADHD in the first place, anyways. So I'm all for chucking the whole bunch and moving to something more exciting. But um, There's reasons why they did that, partly because the same medicines work for both inattentive and hyperactive. So the thought is that the biology is somewhat similar.
Well, and the genetics seems to be too.
Exactly. And the genetics underlie the biology. So that, I can see why that happened. But from a patient perspective, I can also see why that could be super confusing.
Yeah, because the things you're talking about is attention. I can laser focus into things.
Hmm.
That's actually something that becomes a problem because I can't stop. Uh,
Yes.
but my at one, I mean, I remember being in fifth grade and our lockers were at the back of the classroom, and I would go to my locker, slam my locker shut, and then scream as I ran across the classroom. And my teacher did not appreciate that at all.
No, that wasn't what she was looking for in a student, was it?
No.
So I would say that, in general, littler kids are more hyperactive and people settle down as they get older. Although, I just saw a 45-year-old the other day. He was just itching to get out. I mean, I was talking as fast as I can because I could see he's like, "Are we done yet? Are we done yet? Are you
Uh-huh.
done yet?" And that
And
that was,
it
he
seems
was
like
done.
the really hyper adults are usually men. I mean, I'm still pretty hyper.
Hmm.
I When I'm excited, I talk really fast and I move really fast and I'm like go 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 go. So I still have quite a bit of my hyperness, but maybe I started off more hyper than the average person as well.
Well, you probably did, but the thing about it, the hyperness in and of itself can be a real asset. So, there's some quotes from like, the head founder of Kinko's, and he said, I used to be hyperactive, and because of that, I would get out and go to all these places and go to the stores and see what's going on, and you know, half the time I'm sucking down my coffee to get like just a teeny bit of hyper into me so that I could, keep up with these hyper people. But the thing about it is it can be also off-putting. It can be socially unacceptable, and that may be more the case than for girls who, the blurting out and all that is socially unacceptable, particularly for girls or has been. And many women have anxiety, which may be a feeling of restlessness. So when you talk about anxious people, you picture somebody who's pacing and restless a lot of the time, right? That same movement may be part of the hyperactivity in ADHD. As a matter of fact, many women and men both who have initially been treated for anxiety, turns out that they have ADHD underlying.
So when they're treated for anxiety, they're given anxiety medication that then they find doesn't work because they're not actually anxious or hyper or
Well, sometimes it's hard to know what's from what, right? You got to pick something to start with. So, you try to if when you're not focusing, it makes you more anxious. When you're more anxious, it makes it harder to focus. So sometimes it's hard to know where in that cycle to intervene. Oftentimes, I try to figure out what was coming first and did that like before you got anxious, did you have troubles focusing? Oh, you did? Okay, maybe we'll do that first. But some people, their anxiety is so off the chart, it doesn't matter if they also have ADHD because we got to tamp that down first. Or along with that can come sadness and so on. And don't forget sleep issues, right? When you're anxious, it's harder to sleep, or you wake up in the middle of the night anxious, which is just not fair, but it happens. And so then the next day you find it harder to focus and you become more anxious. So there's a lot of sort of layers to trying to figure out what to do first.
Mhm. Wow. Well, this has been so incredibly informative. Thank you so much.
Oh, sure.
Um, so I'd love to have you share about your book with our audience before we need to go our separate ways.
Oh, sure. So I have a website, which hopefully Jess will share with you guys, where you can sort of find everything. But I have
Well,
a
go
book.
ahead and share it verbally. So for our podcast listeners,
Sure.
yeah,
It's sarahcheyette.com, sarahcheyette.com. And what I would say is that I have several books. One book was written actually with my kid's karate teacher and went into the athletic mindset and how that helps kids and adults with ADHD. My husband was also part of that. He's a psychiatrist. I wrote another book with a young woman who I think is 22 now, something like that. Happy birthday if I missed your birthday. But Grace Friedman has grown up with ADHD, and it was her mission to try to help teens with ADHD. So she and I wrote that one together. And then finally, I just wrote a little graphic novel type of little book with lots of cute pictures called
that's great.
ADHD and Me.
That's
So for
great for our dyslexic listeners.
yes, that's what I was going to say. For your audience, that might be a hit. It's that's on I mean, you can buy all these things on Amazon, right? And what I would say is that's a great way to explain ADHD either to kids or adults because it's not really different, but it's really aimed at kids.
Awesome. That's wonderful. And on your website, you had said you have lots of resources available as well.
Yeah, we try to, post things that we think are helpful. And I've been on other shows like this one, and so there are links to those, and we'll certainly place this one on our website as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. And so, is there anything else you would like to share with the audience before we finish up?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say uh the either, your kid or the person you're talking about, maybe it's a partner or relative, they are not a diagnosis, they're a person. And you take the good with the bad and the bad with the good. So the main thing is to keep a connection with people and to try to find some way to meet them where they are. People with ADHD, sure, there are some things that are difficult, but all of them also have some gifts that they bring to the relationship, and just to remember that.
Wonderful. That is so true. About everyone, not just people with ADHD, but
You're totally right about that. But a
but
lot of
some.
people with the ADHD, they hear so many negatives. It's like, yeah, let's remember there are lots of positives too.
Well, and that's what I always say is my ability to be a CEO of two businesses is because I have an overabundance of energy. And, so at the end of the day, I usually can put in a lot more hours than the average person, which I did not realize until,
It's a
uh,
gift.
yeah.
That's a gift. A gift, 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 right? So, I believe you do more and you accomplish more and you feel better when you can manage your attention. So, one way or the other, that's worth trying to do.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sarah. Sarah, I really appreciate you taking the time to meet with us today.
Sure. I'm glad we could do this, Jess. Nice chatting with you. Take
Yes.
care.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye.